Hello my friends, Breton here, and today we're going to talk about building a fire, the recipe for the fire, okay? So we're not going to sit and chat around it, we're just going to talk about how to get it rolling, if that's okay with you. And here at the land we like to focus on three key ingredients. We like to focus on really nice tinder, that's our primary combustible. It's the material that takes the spark or the flame right off the bat and amplifies it, gets some heat going for the first part of the fire triangle. Second ingredient we like to focus on is the kindling. Kindling is the material that you can forage for in the forest that takes that initial bit of flame that the tinder grabs and starts to build and starts to grow. Whereas the first primary combustible tends to be papery, like birch bark or actual paper, or really high surface area twigs, tiny little twigs. Kindling, on the other hand, tends to be more like finger thick or even pencil thick in some case twigs. It's tiny fuel for the fire. Then the third ingredient is the bigger stuff, the beefier stuff. This is the proper fuel. Now I know that all three together are technically fuel for the fire, but we tend to think of this third category as your firewood. So you don't think of your birch bark and your kindling as firewood, strictly so speaking. We're talking slightly beefier pieces of softwoods or hardwoods from actual trees now, not just the branches, but the parts of the trunk. Sound good? All right, my friends. So it's still kind of wintry. There's still a layer of snow covering the ground, and so what we're going to set ourselves up for today is an upside down fire. All I need is a half decent little spot that's more or less free and above the snowy layer. So I lay a little foundation for our fire to keep it off the ground, keep it off the snow, so that as soon as the snow starts melting, it doesn't immediately dampen the fire too much. That will happen inevitably down the road, but for now we're in the clear if we build an upside down fire. Put the heavier fuely pieces on the bottom. Sweet. Next up, I've got my little handy piece of paper in which I was storing some of the primary combustibles. Does anybody remember what this was called? This is the tinder. Now that's plenty, but that's gonna guarantee me, you know what, I'm gonna save some of that for later because that's just wasteful. This in southern and central Ontario is proof that God wants humans to have fire, because the bark of the birch tree will burn regardless of whether it's wet or dry. That said, of course, dry burns very nicely, and this is the greatest stuff to get your fire going. Now today I'm going to be starting it with a trusty lighter. Not that it's the most intense or labor-intensive method of getting a flame, but that's not necessarily the purpose of the video today. Furthermore, I still think that a half-decent survival or just camp skill is keeping your lighter dry and warm enough even in the winter time. So I'm going to use that without any shame after having already qualified it. I usually like to start it off with my hand, being very mindful that it catches quite quickly, and then allow the birch bark to transfer the flame to its friends. Now once I've done that, I'm ready with my tinder bundle. And this is an aggressive tinder bundle. As you can see, it's full of sticks from about pencil thick, maybe even pencil lead thick, all the way up to almost finger, and in some cases thumb thick. As you can see also, it's about one hug. That's what I've collected, and it's from snap wood. This is the wood from twigs or lower branches on the tree that the tree has already grown beyond, and it's de-emphasized the flow of nutrients and water to the lower arbors, the lower branches, and as a result they just dry out and they pretty much wither up and die. And if they snap readily, that means they're very nice and dry, and they're awesome kindling for the fire. As you can see, I'm not worried about this stuff blowing away in a breeze. Now that this is on there, the fire is more or less established, and I've got time now to add the third ingredient, which is my firewood. And this is what's going to give a little bit of duration to the fire. And just to get things rolling here, I'm going to build just a nice little warming fire. Dry off some of my clothes, and then thereafter I can build a little tripod and have a cup of tea. So the purpose of this exercise today is not just to show you about fires, but evoke in you a little curiosity about your team or about the people that you have around you. If you don't mind, I'd like you to sort of explore these ingredients of the fire and think about your team in those terms. Specifically, we talked about the recipe for a fire: tinder, kindling, and fuel. Who in your team supplies those three categories of fostering ideas, or fostering the work or productivity or performance of your team? Who can capture the spark of innovation or the initial little fiery idea of motivation and provide enough sort of interest or impetus for it to be picked up and developed? Who is the person that would pick up those ideas and develop it? And then finally, who among you, or what among you, has the stamina and the logistical and project management skills in order to really see those fiery, interesting, innovative ideas come to fruition? One final piece of the puzzle here. I know we already had we had the 3 recipes, but there's also the fire triangle. And the fire triangle is not so much about the recipe for a fire, but it's the sort of minimum necessary requirements in the environment or in your area in order for a fire to be sustained. And those 3 are, as you can see, we've got heat, and the heat came from my lighter, or it comes from your fire steel, or flint and steel, or in some cases, rubbing 2 sticks together, and we could talk about friction fire later. A second key part of the fire triangle is the fuel. You need some materials. You need the tinder, the kindling, and the firewood in order for a fire to actually happen. But the third thing, and you can never forget it, my dear friend, is that nice breeze, that oxygen. This is a chemical reaction, and don't forget it. And this chemical reaction won't happen unless you've got the chemistry, and that's oxygen. So that's another key element: is who among your team, or what forces in your team provide those minimum necessary requirements, just like in the fire triangle. So we've got 2 sets of 3, and I'd like you to explore that with me a little bit. Looking forward to seeing what you come up with. Thanks, my friends. Sweet.